This week, we welcome Khaja Ahmed, advisor at the CISO Forum, to discuss how to get consensus on your security program. In the Leadership and Communications section, is the C-Suite right for you? What Fortune 100s are getting wrong about cybersecurity hiring, why communication is exhausting in chaotic workplaces, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Ransomware, supply chain attacks, 0 days. Cyber threats don't wait, and neither should your business. With ThreatLocker, you're not just reacting to threats, you're stopping them before they start. Our Zero Trust endpoint protection locks down your environment with pinpoint control over what's allowed to run and what's not. No guesswork, no blind spots. Just proactive, built-for-now security that keeps your business moving. Want to see how a true default deny strategy works? Head over to securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker and take the first step towards shutting the door on threats before they even knock. Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 405, recorded July 21st, 2025. I am your host, Matt Alderman. I have a full crew today. I've got all three of my co-hosts. I can't wait to get started. First, Mr. Jason Albuquerque. Hey, Jason.
What's going on, Matt? Hey, we're almost there, man. NFL training camp just started. I'm a happy guy.
I already started researching, am I going back to Hulu Live or am I staying YouTube TV Live for my streaming? Because I only live stream for football season. That's it.
That's it.
They're both the same price, I guess, but I like my YouTube TV channel selections a little better, so I'm probably going back that way.
What a day that we have to sit back and say, what subscription do I want to be able to see as many NFL games as possible?
Yes. Also joining us from the great state of Texas, Mr. Ben Carr.
Hey, Matt. Good to be with you again on this fine Monday, and Jason and Summer as well. Look forward to a good discussion today.
You drying out down south, buddy?
A little bit. Yeah, it's certainly heat's back. Not so much rain anymore, but I think we're still reaping the benefits of full lakes down here in Central Texas.
Oh yeah, all the retention ponds here are just full, and I still have a creek flowing in the backyard, which is really late for this time of year for me. So, and last but certainly not least, Summer Fowler, how are you? How's Pittsburgh doing?
It's great. I'm not quite as excited as Jason because the real season, the NHL season, doesn't start for a couple more months. And I have to say, I'm a little disappointed. I was expecting Jason to have a shirt that said, "Pay me what you owe me." And I thought that he would be wearing it today.
I'm not that blatantly obvious.
Jason's problem is he's getting paid a ton more than he's owed, but that's another discussion.
Maybe that's what it is.
Oh, you can tell we're going to have fun today. And our guest coming in a career spanning more than 3 decades, Khaja Ahmed has worked at the forefront of security technology, developing cutting-edge solutions in secure communications, data privacy, and applied cryptography. He has led high-impact security teams at leading companies including Gemini, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. His expertise spans hands-on secure system design, organizational leadership, and executive engagement, enabling him to architect solutions, build world-class teams, and shape security strategies at the board level. Currently, Khaja is an angel investor, advisor, consultant to startups, just like me, and teaches information security and computer architecture as adjunct faculty at Bellevue College. Khaja, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you, Matt. Excited to be here. Looking forward to a great conversation.
So how this interview started, just so people know, Khaja, I saw you present up in Seattle at one of the CISO Forum events, and I was like, ooh, I need to bring you on the podcast. And at the time we were talking about maybe hiring or something like that. But when we did our prep call last week, you posed a question, and this is the topic of this conversation. You posed a question that I thought was really interesting. And the question was, how do we get security right?
Yep.
And my guess is that answer varies depending on a lot of factors.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, because I think the way we talked about it, I said the security that is right for, let's say, protecting credit cards might be too much for protecting your cafeteria menu and perhaps too little for protecting nuclear launch codes, just to take an extreme example, right? So you have to think about the assets being protected, what the threat landscape is at that time for that asset, and then, create a definition of what constitutes adequately secure, and then go after it.
Yeah, and going after it is kind of the heart of this conversation, which is how do you build consensus across the organization to make the right investments to implement the right security, which are challenges that I think probably all three of my co-hosts have faced in some form or fashion in their careers, as well as you. And we probably have a lot of people listening out there that are in that same kind of boat. Like, how do I go get the funding and the consensus across the business to help me put that security plan in motion?
Yeah, and I think the few things that I found super helpful are probably top of the list would be you have to have a real empathy for the business. You can't be one of those security experts who's sort of locked in on the technology end of it. You actually have to understand how the company makes money and what business is it in, and you have to care about it. Because then that gives you the vocabulary and the language and the trust that allows you to have that conversation with your CEO, with the chief product officer, with your head of engineering, and so forth. So as long as you're, talking in terms that are meaningful to them about revenue, about risk, about product schedules, and what the impact of on all of those will be of your security choices, you're much more likely to have a willing and let's say trusting audience. Right? You have to establish your trust with them. The other part of that is you truly have to know your stuff, right? I mean, you do have to be a security expert, and you have to have enough immersion in the domain that when you speak, it comes across as a credible and well thought through, well put together a case for whatever it is that you're making the case for, right? So that combination of empathy for business and domain knowledge, I think, is really how you go about it, right? Those I'd say are the
So Khaja, here's a question for you, right? Because you had said earlier, getting security right is, dependent on the assets and making sure that you're protecting assets in the right way, making sure you're protecting the assets to the level they need to be protected. But some of the struggles that CISOs have is they don't know what they have. They don't know what assets are there, right? They're working with the business, but we talk a lot about say easy, do hard here. We have a segment on say easy, do hard. Knowing your assets and being able to classify those assets and putting a risk factor to those is very difficult in some instances. So what are some recommendations that you have for CISOs to be able to embed themselves in the business and learn exactly what types of data assets are going throughout the organization?
Absolutely. This is really that part about the empathy for business, right? You have to understand the business, right? You really do, because that's what you're trying to defend ultimately, right? So if you don't know what all the sources of input are to the business and what the sequence of processing is within your business of that ingested data and where the data goes out, if you don't understand the complete life cycle of the data, what are you going to protect, right? Where is that data living? Where is it stored? Where is it processed? How does it morph and move across the infrastructure, right? So having an understanding of all of that is key, right? I think I try and talk about, at least I did this talk on how to become a great security engineer. And one of the things I tell people is you should think of security as a super specialization of IT. The analog I use is, let's say a competent, high caliber IT professional is an MD, a general physician. Security and let's say even a subspecialization of that, let's say intrusion detection, is sort of like, you've done your MD and now you've done oncology, so you're a cancer specialist, and then maybe you do pediatric oncology, right? So you have to understand the IT infrastructure really well, and then reveal a dimension of it which is generally not visible to or understood by the rest of the folks, right? That's your job. So, and that means you got to have good asset management. It's going to be imperfect because, especially now, if you think, for example, as keys as assets, like an API key, it's an asset, it's an important asset, right? And if you think about workloads that are ephemeral, stuff comes and goes, right? The complexity of the world that we live in is it's not a bunch of servers sitting there in a relatively stable environment that you can sort of track, grow, and understand, right? It's serverless computing, it's ephemeral workloads, it's agentic AI, it's all these things that come and go, and you have all these dependencies with third-party services and SaaS and libraries and components that you ingest. So it's certainly hard, but hey, that's why they tell me you get paid the big bucks.
So
And
pets,
Khaja, go ahead.
pets not cattle.
Exactly.
To just grab a phrase quickly. Go ahead, Summer. Sorry.
So, Kaja, one of the things, and I like your medical analogy, right? Because you think of a team of medical doctors that do rounds in the morning as they go around and look at the cases. And our cyber teams really need to be that as well, because despite needing to understand the industry, CISOs can't understand it all the time. And they automatically get a little bit separated from that hands-on keyboard. And so what advice do you have that may be underrated in how to build the best team that can go on those rounds with you and say, hey, we need an intrusion detection specialist here, and we need someone who knows identity and access management? What are some of those things that you've done to ensure you have that best team of cyber doctors with you?
That's a fantastic question, Summer. And my test is, if you think of all the verticals in security, cybersecurity, let's say platform hardening or fleet security of your laptops and phones, infrastructure security, network security, applied cryptography, intrusion detection and analysis, forensics. If you think of all of these verticals, you want at least one person on your team who can teach you one of those things. That person better be a lot better than you are in that vertical, right? So when you have in every one of these areas, let's say on a scale of 0 through 9, 8s and 9s in every one of these not one person, but there's somebody who's a fantastic intrusion analysis person, and somebody who's fantastic at, let's say, application security. When you have people who can teach you, now the doctor who does the rounds, the chief surgeon, typically has these assistants with them, right? Those assistants are often going to know more about some narrow area of specialty than the chief surgeon might, right? So you're the chief surgeon, but you better have people around you who can teach you something and understand each of these verticals at a greater depth and with a sharper focus than you can. That's what you're looking for. That's how you build a world-class team.
So I'm interested, Kasia, because we'll continue the medical analogy, right? Most people aren't the MD Andersons of the world, right? They're the local, medical care facility out in West Texas that doesn't have cancer specialists, doesn't have heart surgeons, doesn't have, brain surgeons, but they still have to get the job done, right? So how do they do that, right? Because, having a specific person in each vertical, it's a luxury I've had in my career, and it's a luxury I haven't had in other parts of my career. I mean, it definitely scales differently depending upon the investment of the organization and how big and what the threat is against the organization, right?
Absolutely. So then let's say, first of all, the security apparatus, let's say, by which I mean that combination of people, tools and technologies, and practices and procedures. That triad makes your security apparatus. that apparatus has to be tailored to whatever the demands of the company are, which is to say the assets that you're protecting. Now, how do you put together that apparatus? Where do those people and those services come from? If you're a very small shop, it might be, first of all, that your security needs are modest. And it's perfectly okay to put it all in AWS and use, to the greatest extent possible, outsourcing, right? Because you're not going to have the expertise to, or the potentially the payroll to hire world-class security experts in each of these areas. So you depend on the platform. You have to be a good judge and pick the right platform, but you could certainly do that. But the real question is not how do you do it, but what is the it, which is what is the right level of security. If you don't have agreement between the the leadership team, the board, and yourself on what that is, what is that security target? If you don't have that, you're going to have one hell of a time making the right level of investment. Maybe you do need to hire world-class. So cryptocurrencies, having worked for a cryptocurrency company for almost 2 years, by far the most attacked asset on the net. I don't know if this is a well-known fact, but BBC reported that 45% of North Korea's nuclear missile budget is based on stolen cryptocurrency. And it's not just North Korea. There are nation states and organized crime groups that are highly, highly motivated. You know about the Bybit hack, 1.5 billion or 1.6 billion. You know about Kraken and Binance, right? I think an impact of $500 million, right? I mean, that's a lot of money. So the motivation there on both sides is extremely high. So if you're I betcha no CISO in any cryptocurrency company is having a hard time making the case for doing security right. On the other hand, if you're doing something, in fact, I know someone who runs security for a trucking company. It's shipping data, it's movement of goods, it's logistics, and it's important. It's a competitive field. So you don't want that data stolen, and you certainly don't want it corrupted, right? So what is the right level of investment there, right? There was some conversation about how that's been a hard conversation between the CISO and the leadership, right? And we talked about strategies on how that can go better, right? In digging into that a little bit, it seemed like there wasn't agreement on what the right security target was. And if you don't have agreement on that, you're going to have a uphill climb all the time, right? So that's the central thing.
So how do you recommend some CISOs break down some of the barriers that exist today? Because in many organizations, security is still seen as a technology problem, the Department of No, a little bit of friction and roadblock to get innovation out the door. What do you recommend CISOs do, or how they can help build relationships across the business in order to start those conversations? Because that's a lot of the barriers CISOs are facing, that they're seen as a cost center. They're seen as a technology problem. I had one CEO say, you guys are just insurance, right? I mean, that's the mentality of a lot of C-level executives in boards and leaders today, is that we're just friction to the business. How do we break down that barrier?
Yeah, you're also the brakes and the steering. You're not just insurance. You actually stop the company from trying to take a turn too fast and going off the edge of the cliff. And the CISO, that CEO, that's the conversation to have with that CEO, right? Because you're the guardrails. Use whatever analogy you like, but I forget who said this. I'm going to credit Bruce Schneier with this, or maybe it was somebody else. But they talked about security is not about a feature. It is about making sure that the feature continues to be usable. Right. It is about ensuring that the business continues to operate. It's not about aiding the business. It's about protecting the business from going under, just being taken out. It's because that does happen. Companies again, it varies, right? There are companies which have had significant compromises, and there have not been long-term adverse consequences for them, right? Which sets up the wrong motivation for that class of companies. And then there are companies which got compromised and ceased to exist, which is a common case in cryptocurrency companies. And there was a very famous story. I'm sure H.B. Gary. Does anybody remember that story?
Yeah.
H.B. Gary, yeah. So the CEO of that company, I think, said he's going to name and shame the anonymous group and blah, blah, made some claims about what he's going to do. And then, of course, the anonymous group took all his email, all his data, published it all, and that company ceased to exist, right? So depending on what your business is, the consequences can be extreme. And that's the shared understanding you need between yourself as the CISO and the leadership. Are we on the same page about what the consequences are? And if you're not on the same page, by the way, you're the fall guy. You've been hired just so they need somebody to fire when, things go wrong. Right?
This is
So
where
be
the
careful.
this is where the medical analogy gets a little interesting to me. Because I'm the patient, right? I'm kind of a captive audience. I need something done, right? So it's really easy to get to consensus, right? I need a knee surgery. Here are my risks. I might die. I might not, but it's a pretty low potential. We've been using anesthesia for a while, right? So in our medical terms, the doctor and the patient, there's a shared consensus there because you're trying to get something. I guess the challenge is, how do you get consensus then with the C-level when it comes to security? And my guess is it has to do with how we articulate the risk to the business, similar to the risks of a surgery, but it can't be in technical terms, can it? Because they don't really understand technical terms.
Correct. Absolutely right. In fact, I tell my directors of security will vouch for this. I tell them to never talk about a bug with the leadership, with the CEO or anybody in the C-suite. Don't talk to them about some technical problem. If you can't express the problem in either dollar terms or in legal risk terms, you don't have a problem. Nobody is listening to, oh, gee, well, the database ACL was written incorrectly, and they're not listening anymore. It's no. What you want to talk about is, there's a risk that customer data has already leaked out and we don't know, and I'm worried about legal liability. Suddenly you have everybody's attention, right? You talk about bugs and vulnerabilities, nobody cares. And they shouldn't. I mean, it's not their job. Your job is to figure out the technology, and your job is to translate that into terms that are meaningful to the business. If you don't understand what the impact of a situation is to the business, you're the wrong person for the job.
So Khaja, that's great, because we often talk about one of the magical questions that CISOs get and that we talk about in the community is, when you go in front of the board, what are the metrics that you give them? What is it that you're trying to show them? And I completely agree with you. If you can't talk about this in the terms that the board is thinking about, it becomes useless. So if you were in a standard, hey, I'm giving an update on my program to the board, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you would make sure you would convey?
Right. Okay. So it's the trend line, right, that you want to talk about. So metrics. So for example, if you say, hey, we have 7 P0 or critical vulnerabilities in our infrastructure. We found 7 of them this quarter. That's not useful information. Is that too many? Is that too few? What does that mean, right? But if you say the rate at which we've been fixing critical vulnerabilities has changed from 3 months to 1 month. Now you're doing something right, right? And if you say the vulnerabilities we used to find every month, every quarter, used to be somewhere in the order of the 40s, 50s, and now they're down to in the teens, right? That's progress. So showing trend lines, right? By the way, even that doesn't actually tell you what the security posture is, or rather the state of risk is. What it tells you is you're moving in the right direction, right? And that's a reassuring thing for a board. For the board, they don't. In fact, heck, the CISO sometimes doesn't know if where we are at is the right spot to be at or not. Right? Yeah, it's a judgment call, right? And it's by the way, this whole business about risk quantification, you can quantify various aspects of the risk, but the aggregate risk is a matter of a judgment call, right? Anybody who's been immersed in the domain, you've spent 2 decades, 3 decades doing this, you have a very good sense of what the assets are and what typical vulnerabilities are and what kinds of things lead to break-ins, what kinds of things and situations lead to serious and non-fixable vulnerabilities, etc. It's that combination of your judgment call and these metrics that will inspire confidence with the board. The board is trying to really understand, do you know what the hell you're doing? That's their question, really. They might ask you, hey, how many bugs do you got? But what they're really trying to say is, do you know what the hell you're doing and are you in control?
So how do you feel about matching that up to maturity scores? Like that's where I think a lot of CISOs have come out is they've said, all right, we're going to have a target maturity state. We're going to express where we are, what the roadmap is to get there. How do you feel about that? Do you think that that's moving the bubble in a positive direction, or do you think that that's still just noise and the board doesn't really care?
Oh no, I think that is actually very useful. Now, how you express that has to be tailored to the board and the personalities in the room, right? I mean, you can talk about the more formal methodologies for assessing maturity levels, or you can talk in very generic terms like the board. I had the pleasure of dealing with really good, smart people, cared about where are we at today in nickel and dime words. We don't have to be super formal about it. And where do you think we need to be and how do we get there, right? So you can talk about, well, our ability to do triage of vulnerabilities isn't where it needs to be because the engineering organization is right now oversubscribed. We need to improve that. And I think we're going to get there once we ship this quarter and there is this plan to hire additional people and the communication between the intrusion detection and the scanning team and the engineering team is getting better, blah, 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 right? That kind of a narrative, do you actually know what's going on, is sometimes all that is needed.
Around the right metrics, though.
Yes. Because, I mean, it can't be, hey, this is my guess, this is my intuition, this is what my belly button says. It has to be backed by numbers. There was this debate about data-driven decisions, and I came down on the side of data-aided decisions. You don't want data-driven decisions because if data is dictating the decision, well, you could just write a program and call it CISO, and that will take the decision, right? It's not data-driven.
Somebody's trying to write an AI bot to do that, by the way, just saying.
Well, hey, this AI conversation, that beast is becoming more and more sentient, It's
but I think you're right. What I think the security industry sometimes doesn't understand is the data is there to support decision making by a human, right? I've always said we're decision support systems, right? we're using that data, but we still have to use like our intuition, our gut, like our experience to actually then decide which way to go. And if you can then articulate that to the executives and to the board on why we should make those decisions, then it helps in this consensus conversation is based on what we're seeing. Here's what we recommend we should be doing, and here's why. And when you can wrap that narrative together around the right data, doesn't that put us in a better position from a consensus perspective? At least I hope it would.
Yeah, it does. Was it that Yuval Noah Harari book? Some book said that human beings are wired to communicate via stories. Information that we receive in the form of a story really stays with us. If I give you some datum, it might be lost, in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
But if I tell you a story about it, it's likely to stick with you.
I think that was Making Numbers Count, which is my number one favorite book, by the way, about business. They
How's that?
say something very similar. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, storytelling. Your ability to lead effectively, I think, is probably at least 1/3 based on communication and 1/3 domain expertise and 1/3 knowledge of business. Right? Just to make up things. Communication is such a powerful thing. If you can't cogently, with clarity and concisely convey a message to people who are decision makers and are going to help you make the call, you're not going to be effective. Right? That's a very powerful skill.
Yeah. That's why our second segment is leadership and communication, because we believe the same thing. Khaja, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Thank you. It was a great conversation and I enjoyed it.
Thank you. All right, so let's get into this week's articles, and a couple of them happen to be related to the previous segment. And I kind of pulled them on purpose. I knew what we were going to talk about. So we're going to have some overlap here on purpose. So first article, how to calculate cybersecurity ROI for CEOs and boards. Now, we did not talk about this with Khaja specifically, right? We were talking through how to communicate, what metrics to share at the board. I pulled this article in because this has been one of these topic areas of, can you determine ROI for security? There's aspects of this article I like, by the way, because this is part of my day job. But then there's a couple parts here I'm like, not quite.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it aligns to part of the conversation we just had because, like I had mentioned, we sit back and we try. Every organization knows cybersecurity is a necessity. But then when it comes down to putting their money where their mouth is, that's where we struggle, right? To invest is a struggle. To get investment dollars is always a struggle. We're looked at as a cost center. So having these frameworks in place that can maybe help us break down those barriers and have the right conversations with the CEO, with the CFO, with the board of directors is helpful. Now, I've always leaned toward the FAIR framework, which is perfectly fine. I know this one, goes over Rossi in great detail, but having the ability to articulate risk to dollars, I think is very important. It's an important conversation to have. And the other side of this article I really liked was actually down at the bottom, and it started talking about, hey, here are some conversations around cost avoidance that could actually hurt your credibility as a CISO and lose trust as a CISO because you're talking about brand hits and you're making a guess. The CEO is going to look at you and say, you can't guess that, right? And it starts hurting your credibility. So, I like the bottom part where you say, you can have these conversations, but be really careful with how you speak to these. Yeah. Because a lot of it is going to be based on assumption or not being precise. You're not going to have precision in the conversation.
So where this gets interesting for me, because I support both FAIR and a straight line ALE calculation in our platform, right? Fair to me can be a little complex at times, because if you understand parts of the ontology, you realize it's really hard to understand your resistance strength and your vulnerability percentage, et cetera, right? But if you keep it simple, which is frequency times loss, right? You can start to standardize around an annualized loss expectancy calculation that you could then use to understand the cost associated with implementing technology and what that potential gain is, right? And so we actually calculate return on security investment in the CyberSane platform, because we look at your current risk posture, your target risk posture. We can calculate the difference through either of those two models, run it against your costs and say, is it worth the cost to reduce the risk, right? So we do this in platform. And so from that perspective, I love the article, because I think this is one thing that people struggle with. And if you can put it in these terms, it does start to help you justify investment in dollars, right? Where it goes into, it's like, then, you know, the debate I don't necessarily want to get into is like, well, is it fair? Is it this and that and the other thing? I don't know if it matters personally, right? At the end of the day, as long as it's a consistent way of measuring and reporting back, I think you can get benefit from it.
I'll only speak to the feedback that I got from a CFO. And the feedback from the CFO was, listen, when you're doing it just based on that, you're getting subjective estimates. It's single point estimates. And they start ticking away and beating away at your philosophy to say it needs to be more complex. It needs to be more nuanced. So that's why I started leaning in toward the fair side of the aisle, because a CFO sit back and told me, listen, that's just way too simple.
That's part of the problem, though, right? Like when you enter in these conversations in anything around risk, right, and you start to talk about this, you end up diving into a conversation where people get real specific really fast. And they go, that's not risk, or that's not this, or that's not that.
Yep.
And so then as a CISO, so I get back to that discussion that I brought up that we had in the last thing is, we're all not MD Anderson, right? Like, and so if you're Bank of America, General Motors, like, you know, MasterCard, Visa, you've got an army, right? Like literally, and you know, look, if you talk to a large financial, it's thousands of people that are in the cyber team. Visa, when I was there, we had 400, and I thought that was like ridiculous, like 400 people, right, in a program. You're in an average, like let's say a small publicly traded company, you might have 40 people, 50 people.
You might.
That's a large, right? If you've got that. Yeah. So when you think about that, then in this, you put your CISO hat on and you're down in the trenches. You're like, man, do I have time to do all this? It seems like CFO stuff or COO stuff, and so it feels like it bogs you down and is taking away from doing the work. And that's, I'm not saying it is, I'm saying it feels like that, right? It also is outside of your wheelhouse of comfort. And so it's hard, right? Like, I think that's the friction.
You want to know what to your point, the most powerful response I had back to him was, because we didn't have a chief risk officer, it was the CFO.
Yeah.
Right? He owned risk across the organization. Okay, teach me how you assess risk for this business. I put it back on his plate. Let me know how you want this done. If you feel this is way too simple of an equation for you, let's work on something together, and I'll align risk to your program,
right,
to your framework.
I think the hard part that I have with anything ROI is actually the word return, right? Because what are we getting in return? And so I like to look at it, you guys are hitting on it. I like to look at it as I'm making us resilient by investment, not that I'm getting a return on it necessarily. And let's go back to the medical thing, right? If I said, you know, like health is a journey, but just like cybersecurity is a journey, there's no point in my life that I'm going to say I am healthy enough. Just like there is no point in security where I'm going to say I am secure enough. So what I'm doing is I'm making trade-offs and decisions. Should I drink more water? Should I go to the gym for an hour a day? Should I do 1,000 push-ups? There are all these things that I could do, right? I should wear sunscreen. But guess what? I only have so much time in the day and so much money. So I have to make those decisions in my health journey. That's what I'm doing as a CISO. I'm trying to make the company
Then the
healthy.
CRO comes in and says, but I love cupcakes.
Yes, yes, and you know
that's
what?
the problem. You're not
That's
getting
when you
yourself
do.
healthy. You're getting 150 people who work for your company
But that's
healthy.
where you come in and you say, great. So you love cupcakes in this area. That's what this is going to be doing as a risk to the company. But I get it. I mean, you get where I'm going with this. It's the return it's the return name that I think we get wrapped around the axle because it's a financial mean.
I agree with you 100%. Like the return thing is super hard, and it makes every conversation difficult because like there's no return on this stuff. It's just cost, right? And I've said for a long time, like to me, I think as an industry, CISOs need to do a better job of saying, I'm not going to buy something from another company unless it's secure. And that then becomes an incentive that there is a return, is that you can drive revenue because you have a secure product. And so it's a competitive advantage. I think right now it's somewhat falling on deaf ears. Like I've tried to make this argument and it doesn't hold water sometimes because, in your own organization, people go, I don't care if it's secure. I need to have it. I need to do it now. I'm going to write the exception, or I'm going to push you out of the way, Mr. CISO. We need to do a better job of holding the high watermark and saying, man, like I'd much rather buy the secure product because that is going to save our business. And if we're all doing that, it starts to raise all boats.
I mean, in all honesty, we as executives within the company have to sit back and say, what are the company's goals and how do I align to those?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
One of my company's goals was revenue generation when I was a CISO. So I said, how can I best align security to revenue generation? Holy crap. We have 300 customers a quarter come to us and say, what's your security posture? Can you fill out this form? Can you talk to my CISO? Can you talk to my risk? Can you do this? I asked one question. Sales team, would you mind if I had a field in Salesforce where I could drop down and say security influencer? Right? That's all it was. Every opportunity that ran through my business, we put a marker on it. So we knew every opportunity that got influenced by the security team, by the GRC team. That equated to 14 million a quarter by the time I left that company that we were influencing. That I can go to the CEO and say, see, if we failed this test, you probably wouldn't have got that sale.
Yeah. Or if I don't have my SOC 2, I'm not going to win this contract. Or right?
Or shorten the third-party risk timeline, right? When somebody makes a request, like, hey, it was 6 weeks, now it's 2 weeks, right? So we're shortening the sales cycle for you. Like
we have a ton of lag measures as security teams, a ton of lag measures. Where the hell are all our lead measures? Yeah. Where are all the lead measures that show the progress, right? Yeah. That's super important. Yeah. Lead measures for us where we have this opportunity that's about to close. We just influenced, and guess what? We just saw the closed one button get hit. Sweet.
Ring the bell.
That's how much we're influencing.
Ring the bell. Next article. Is the C-suite right for you? I grabbed this article because, look, I think a lot of people have this debate some days of, should I go into the C-suite? So it's a.
Should I be in the C-suite still?
Right. Should I still be here? Yes.
Right.
I mean, I absolutely love this article because it takes you through so many emotions of leadership and the rise through leadership that people go through, right? You start off as a young professional and you work your way through the ranks. And then all of a sudden you get to that tipping point, that pinnacle, that place where you're like, wow, my next step is top tier seat at the table. Do I really want that? Is that where I really want to go? Do I really want to be hands-off keyboard? I'm a technical director now, and I'm hands-on keyboard still. Do I really want that? And it just shows kind of that emotional roller coaster that happens in being a professional, going into leadership, going up through that ladder of success, and you get to decision points where you really start to question, do I want to go to that next level? Do I want to leave this company because guess what? All the C-suite spots, they're full. Do I want to leave this company to go get a C-suite spot? I mean, I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and we sit back as executives now and we get all the stress and all the pressure and you're like, man, I wish I was just at, Walmart saying paper or plastic today. Like that would be so great. You know what I mean? Like, we all have those days where we're just like, where's the simple life again? Yeah. And it just shows the struggles.
The big struggle that I often see that I know I had was, so many of us made it through our careers by being the doers that excelled. And it felt so darn good to be the one that solved the problem, that found this, that made it happen. And when you make the transition at each level of leadership, you just have to be more comfortable with getting that success through others and seeing and being happy with others being the ones that solve the problem, and then giving them the recognition and all of those things. So it takes a little bit of adjustment, or a lot of adjustment, to say, I'm no longer doing, I am doing by leading. And
I had a great CEO say to me one time, you get credit for the 30 things you did as an engineer or a mid-level manager. I'm putting you in this role because I want you to make 5 to 10 good decisions a year. That's what you get paid for. Big decisions, right? That opened it up for me to say, wow, my value isn't in the 30 things a month or 30 things a week that I'm going to be successful at. The value that I'm bringing is the 10 big things I'm going to do this year, 10 big decisions or 10 big pivots or the recommendations I'm going to make. It just it's a different perspective. And you just got to take a step back and look at the perspective of the expected impact you're going to have on the organization. You're going to lead a team, you're going to build them up, but you're there to make big decisions.
Right. And you're going to get scrutinized for those decisions. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And so you got to be ready to defend them, because when things don't go the way you planned,
right.
the pressure of the position then kicks in. Yeah, you do.
Yep.
Absolutely. Next article, Leading Without a Title, The Quiet Power of Purpose-Driven Leadership. I put it after the C-suite one, obviously for this reason, which is, do you really need the title, right? If you take the previous article and you take Sarah's story for a second, Jason, maybe not becoming a C-suite executive, but still being able to lead without that title.
Yeah, no, I mean, you guys know my philosophy. You've heard me say it a million times on this show. Leadership isn't a title, right? It's a mindset. It's what you do every day. I mean, we're always told, and I tell people on the team all the time, lead and be the position you want to be future state, right? Just be that. Just because you're not it right now doesn't mean you don't have to act like it. Act like it. Put on that leadership hat every day, every single day, and just lead. Right? I mean, it's not a title.
In the hierarchy, everyone
doesn't matter.
Should be a leader, right? Like, I mean,
That's
I've
right.
had people that are individual contributors that are very low level that are obviously leaders in the team and showcase that every day.
100%.
I think also, it's a matter of, when people will say, how did you get to your position? And I always say there are multiple different ways. And one of them is excelling at what you do well. Another thing is finding the gaps in the big needs within the company and filling them and making them happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's really where you can step up. And they're just different approaches to that, but it absolutely has nothing to do with the title that you have.
No.
But more in how you can influence, how you can bring people together, and then you become that natural leader.
Exactly it. Yeah. I mean, the bullets that they put out here are perfect, right? Leadership happens everywhere. Lead to serve, not to be seen. Always stay curious, right? Because you're never going to excel if you're not curious and wanting to push the next boundary, and then lift others up. I think that's perfect.
Yep. Same four I had listed on my notes. We think alike, Jason. Think alike.
Yeah.
All right. Next article, How CISOs Can Prepare for the Quantum Cybersecurity Threat. And the first item on the list is inventory. We're all hosts.
Hey, who would have thought?
I was just going to say, these articles drive me crazy, not because it's not important, but listen, there are very few fields that actually need to be focused on this right now. The rest of us just need to, no offense, get shit done and nail the basics.
Yeah.
So that we can be ready for it.
That's it.
Yes.
Nail the basics. Because you want to know what, Summer? If we did have an asset inventory and we did have risk assigned to it, once this goes down, we'll be able to say risk. Ooh, this is where I need to go post-quantum. Boom.
Yes. We're halfway through the post-quantum chart if we can get these basics.
That's right.
down.
Exactly it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I read the list, the precursor list. I'm like, oh man, we're all screwed.
I don't disagree, but I do think that post-quantum does call into some things that we just haven't really thought well about. And that whole mantra of I don't have to worry about my data because it's encrypted. You kind of still do. Right. You really, really do. And I think that's the thing that for me is like thinking only in today and yesterday and not taking some insight into where things are going, and to have some conversations about, yeah, like, sure, we should certainly encrypt data because, as you said, like, it's covering basics, right? But we should start thinking about like what this will mean. Or we had a breach 3 years ago and we didn't report it
That's the big one.
because it wasn't reportable and the data was encrypted. Do you have to report it in 4 years when quantum hits and like that's not a surety anymore that people can't get to it? So that's my thought process on the quantum issue.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, I mean, it's a good plan, but it starts with inventory. And like I said, most of us are really bad at knowing what we have. We
100%.
were talking about this in the last segment, like getting an inventory of all your assets, what's driving the business. If you don't have that, like, first of all, you don't know what to protect. You don't know how to build a security program. You're not going to get consensus. And then, oh, by the way, post-quantum's going to hit you.
Screw you. Absolutely. I mean, it's already starting to screw organizations because of AI, because they don't know their data landscape. They don't know what's out there, and they don't know what's going to get indexed by AI if they implement it. So
they don't know what
jump
model
on the
they're
train now,
going to be
folks.
in.
That's right. I mean, jump on the train now, get the hard work done, and guess what? Now you'll be set up for quantum too. You know?
Yep. What Fortune 100s are getting wrong about cybersecurity hiring?
Because they're disconnected. That's what.
Completely. I mean, look, we've talked about the skills gap issue, right? And we talked about, is it a skills gap or talent, this, that, right?
Yeah.
Like, this article kind of reinforces, like, we're just, what we're trying to hire for, people just don't want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they're forcing people to go back into offices when they've, we've proven that remote workforce works very, very well. Okay, fine, go to a hybrid and maybe have them come in once in a while. But still, you can't just like rip that rug out from people. And we talk about it all the time, burnout and mental health. Come on, what Fortune 100 do you know is actually putting a little bit of elbow grease into that? Not a lot of them.
Nope.
So it's like, at the end of it, they're saying, you know what, do I want to go work for a culture like that? We're running into a generation who cares more about culture than they do about the paycheck. We really are. They care more about the culture. They would trade $30,000 on their salary for a wonderful culture.
Yeah.
I think that is true in some cases. I mean, their parents want them out of their basements, so they should
I get it.
I'm just kidding.
I get it, but
the thing I think about from our last discussion was also, there are different types of disciplines, and we do seem to want the unicorn every time.
Yeah.
And if you're going to hire a pediatric kidney oncologist, a nephrologist, whatever that is, don't expect them to also understand, brain surgery. And we do a lot of that in our hiring, right? And so I think that's something that we have to think about as well. The disconnect between what you actually need and what you're looking for.
Yeah, it's summer. It's so funny. I talked about this last week with my team. We're suffering from the jack of all trades syndrome.
Yeah.
We got to stop. We got to stop looking for the jacks of all trades who bring everything to the table, because they're not going to be great at the targeted areas we need them to be great. They're going to be spread thin. Stop the jack of all trades.
I do think if you talk to actually people who are actually out looking right now, though, like there is a large frustration in like, you'll submit a thing to an open role and 15 minutes later get a kick out like, hey, we've looked at you. You're great, but we're not interested in you.
Yeah,
You didn't look at my resume. Like you didn't really evaluate. There's a lot of people out there who are really qualified, but they're failing the ATS, right? Like they're not being looked at. And as a hiring manager, like when I was hiring, I wasn't getting the resumes. They're being weeded out. Like, yes, mom and dad want you out of their basement, but average cybersecurity in this data set was 152,000. I think you can find an apartment for that. Like there's good money out there. There's a lot of people who are qualified, and the number of people I see, colleagues and like people I've mentored, saying, yeah, man, I'm just not having luck. I've been out of work for 6 months or even a year, right? And they have good qualifications. When you look at them, you're like, what's going on? And for whatever reason, I think we are not doing a good job of actually taking advantage of people out there. Part of it's the, remote versus, the wrong location. Part of it's just, they don't, I don't know, but it's a very frustrating thing that's going on in the market right now.
I wonder if this is a topic that we could get someone in HR to talk to us about this on the show. How does it actually work? when you put a post out there, why does someone get kicked out 15 minutes later? And what about this phenomenon? Because I'm with you, Ben. I see it as well. These people who have tremendous skills and they're like, I have been looking and I've never made it to an interview, or I've never made it past a first interview. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and I struggle with it on the other side. I know there's good people out there, but for some reason, I'm not getting to them either. Like, I don't know what's going on with the recruiting environment right now, but I've been struggling finding really good development resources to come in to fill gaps on my team. And it's super frustrating. Like, I'll get somebody that comes in that accepts a job offer. They won't show up. They'll get another offer. It's like, whoa, what's what's going on? It's crazy.
Right, I think it's part of, we had this a lot in some offshoring stuff. And I think some of that mentality is coming here. You know, I'll call out India, like it did nothing pro or con against India. It's just, this is my experience with it. We would hire people, they would accept the job. You know, they'd have this long period of notice with their prior employer. They would start and they wouldn't show up because they would use that entire notice period once they got accepted by another firm to look for a better offer, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to see some of that mentality with younger workers where, they're just out there hunting for the best opportunity. And I think moving on, because there's not that loyalty employer-employee relationship like there used to be. I mean, it's not expected.
Yeah, I'm frustrated on the other side. Next article, how to build a cybersecurity team to maximize business impact. So again, we just talked about some of the struggles, and then how are you supposed to assemble a team, which is kind of, I'm trying to assemble an engineering team to pick up some stuff. But how close is this? He breaks down the different operational and technology roles.
It sounds like a bad superheroes movie. You're trying to assemble a team. Nobody wants to join.
Right, totally.
Are you even hiring for the right team structure? Like, I look at this. I get it. The SOC and the incident response team, aren't they? They kind of together-ish a little bit. You got threat intelligence sitting in here, right? Red team. These are what he calls the operational teams. Like, well, is that 4 separate teams or is that 1?
Yeah, how big is this guy's one?
I did have ChatGPT create an org chart based on this to look at it because I wanted to see it in org chart form, and it was interesting. I think what the article doesn't talk about is how do you optimize your team for your business and for the business case? Because quite frankly, if your business is of a certain type, you don't need a red team. You need to go outsource red teaming,
Right.
because you don't want that in-house. If that is not your core business and going to stay core, now it might. But you have to take a really hard look at what is the business trying to achieve? What are those objectives? What should I keep in-house? And what should I just go buy as a commodity where someone else can do it better?
Right.
100%.
Well, and so this is why this ties back into the conversation, the first part of this with Khaja, which is getting consensus also requires you to understand the business. So to your point, do I need network security if I'm 100% SaaS cloud-based solution? Maybe not, right? Because AppSec and CloudSec are going to be a little more important to me and my team than a network security person, right? So I think the structure of your team has to align to the business you're in, what you're trying to protect, and how do you want to align your security program? Back to that original question, like, how do I get security right? Well, once you understand those pieces, then you can figure out how to hire the right security team, I think, to align to that strategy.
Yeah, no two companies, no two cultures, no two teams, no two programs are going to be identical. They're not going to be the same. They're not going to be the same, right? And like you said, you have to understand the business. You have to understand what's going to add value to the business, right? And be able to build your team that way. You know, you don't want to walk in as a CISO and your first 90 days blow the team up. You can't do that.
No.
You have to go get your feet under you. You have to go understand the business. You have to go make incremental change, right? And then you start really, maturing the team under your watch. But yeah, you gotta align it to the business.
Yeah. Well, it's the same way I see startups. They get funding rounds, right? And they're like, oh, we got to go hire. And then they hire a bunch of people and then they have to go lay them off later because they overhired.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
Can't we figure out like the right way? And I think, some people don't realize, I don't think some people realize that your biggest line item as a business are people costs.
100%.
It's salaries, it's benefits, people. I don't care how many corporate offices you have. Like I'm telling you, your human capital costs are going to eat up a ton of budget. They just do. It's one of the biggest line items in any budget.
Yeah, and the law of unintended consequences is it's the easiest to cut when you need to start cutting money, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
keep that in mind.
Yeah, exactly. All right, last article, quickly. Why communication is exhausting in chaotic workplaces. Anybody experience this?
Oh God. Yeah. I mean, I think everybody has worked in a place where, communication hasn't been great, and there are silos in the organization. I mean, at the end of it, it's hard to get things done. It's hard to make decisions. It's hard to get any type of strategic decision made. It's 100% chaos, and nobody's on the same page. And when nobody's on the same page, nothing gets done. And it's hard, right? It's really, really hard to work in an environment like that. And, that's why a lot of times when I go work for an organization, those are the questions I ask. I ask culture questions. I ask communication questions. I ask about, how teams integrate with each other and collaborate with each other and what type of environment they have when it comes to that. So it's super important to have teams who work well together, communicate well together, are transparent. We talked about that on the last show, making sure you have a level of transparency that's healthy, right? I think it's a big deal when you're working with an organization or for an organization to have a healthy work life.
I think it's also very much a leadership challenge because your leaders need to establish this as a requirement, the clarity. I liked this article. I mean, I thought it was a little kitschy until the very last sentence when he said, clarity becomes your personal responsibility even when it shouldn't be. And I actually disagree with that. I think it's everyone's responsibility.
Oh, yeah.
No matter where you are in the org, to bring clarity to what it is that you are doing or to ask the questions to make it clear that this is what you're doing and why. So I do think there's a level of responsibility on every single person, but I think it starts with leadership on setting the expectations.
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's like embedding security in the business, right? If you don't have support from the CEO all the way from the top down, and the entire C-suite is awful at communicating and collaborating, it's going to become the culture.
Yeah. And in a hybrid workforce, I think this becomes even more challenging because it's the combination of being in the office with expectations, being remote with expectations. Even if you're like, look, we're all remote now on our side, right? And we've figured out what that right level of communication and touch points are, right? And if we need to get together, we'll put a meeting on the calendar, we'll get clarity, we'll keep going. But I don't like to be over meeting either because then I don't have any time to get my job done, which is making sure we're, moving the product forward. So there's a balance here. And I think hybrid workforces also make this a little challenging as well. Yeah, for sure. Thank you all for joining me today. It's great to have all my co-hosts on. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. I'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.